let's face it, rock and roll bands have been breaking up since the beginning of rock and roll. But when the biggest heavy metal band on the planet breaks up, well, that is definitely newsworthy. And such was the case way back in the early 90s. Bruce Dickinson leaves Iron Maiden. But what follows is one of the most surprising and successful runs in the history of heavy metal. Iron Maiden, The Wilderness Years. Next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of The Metal Dude Abides. Tonight, we are going to take a look at one of the biggest breakups in heavy metal history, Iron Maiden. Bruce Dickinson says adios to Iron Maiden and leads to one of the greatest runs of albums in the history of heavy metal. Now, how did we get to this point? Well, pretty simple, I think. One of the biggest issues that bands have that have very strong leaders in the band is creative control. I'm not saying this in a negative way. If I had my own band, I would want to control the content as well. And through the history of Iron Maiden, Steve Harris has made it very clear. This is his band, and he runs things his way and does things his way. Well, now Bruce Dickinson's been in the band over a decade, and he's got a lot of creative ideas and things he wants to do. One of the things that I was reading up on is back in the Somewhere in Time album, Bruce Dickinson was really pushing Iron Maiden to do an acoustic album, and Steve Harris says, nah, I don't think we're going to do that. So these are the kind of things that just lead to Bruce Dickinson has a vision, Steve Harris has a vision, but at the end of the day, Steve Harris, I'm the boss, this is the way we're going to go. So Bruce Dickinson started to explore some different things, including he went out and did a solo album back in 1990 called Tattooed Millionaire. I wasn't a huge fan of it. I bought the album. It's got some good tracks on it, but clearly this was maybe a sign that Bruce Dickinson was getting restless in Iron Maiden. Well, as what always tends to happen when one of the band members does a solo album, tensions within the band started to ramp up. So they made the decision Bruce Dickinson had to go. So in 1993, they put on one last big show. Chris Angel, the street musician, was involved in this, and so they decided that at the end of this concert, they would kill off Bruce Dickinson. Pretty cool. I remember seeing this concert. I had it on videotape for years when videotape was still a thing. But at the end of the concert, they behead Bruce Dickinson. They put his head on a spike and they go their separate ways. But what happened next was one of the biggest surprises of my metal years. You see, I was a huge Iron Maiden fan. And I just assumed when Bruce Dickinson left Iron Maiden, especially after kind of a lukewarm Tattooed Millionaire solo album, that I would continue on with Iron Maiden and, maybe Bruce Dickinson would, remain relevant, but no way would that become more compelling than Maiden. Boy, was I wrong. Let's talk about the Bruce Dickinson solo years next. Bruce Dickinson is first out of the gate with an album in 1994, the weirdly titled Balls to Picasso. And I have to admit, I wasn't really expecting much. Weird title, weird cover, but Bruce Dickinson has run into a fellow by the name of Roy Z. And Roy Z, from everything I can figure, is a damn musical genius, because he is going to lead most of this Bruce Dickinson solo career, and it is going to be phenomenal. So Balls to Picasso. Right off the bat, there's a song on here, Cyclops, that really grabbed my attention. Like, wow, this is much better than I thought it was going to be. Gods of War, anti-war song. We were right in the heart of the Gulf War and all that was going on there. And what struck me about this song is I start to really notice Bruce's voice and the way he's singing, much more powerful than maybe he was doing on the final Iron Maiden albums. That was one of the complaints, by the way, Steve Harris had, that Bruce Dickinson was kind of mailing it in the last little bit there with Maiden. Here on Gods of War, clearly Bruce is back. One of the top 10 songs in the Bruce Dickinson category, Laughing in the Hiding Bush. Ooh, this is a good one. I am going to attach a playlist to this video. I don't like messing with all the different copyrights. So what I do is oftentimes I will attach a playlist to a video that I make. I'm going to put together, so if you look at the description below, you will see a playlist of some of these great songs from Bruce Dickinson. So if you're not familiar with the works of Bruce Dickinson, stick through the video, but then at the end of it, I pulled up like the top 10 Bruce Dickinson songs from this era. This is one of them. What a great song. Now, if you think it's just about Bruce Dickinson, one of the next songs that catches my eye, Change of Heart. Kind of a ballad, a slower song, but just beautiful, intricate guitars from Roy Z. Really, you can see that these two geniuses collaborating is a very good thing. A deep track on this album, Fire, really heavy, really crunchy, really love it. But the album ends off with the big hit off this album, Tears of the Dragon. And this, again, one of the top 10 songs from Bruce Dickinson. And you know, there's that old saying, always leave them wanting more. Always go out on a high note. That's why many bands put together some of their most memorable materials to do an encore. They want to leave you with that great taste. This is a very good solo album, but Bruce Dickinson, by saving that his best song for the final song, is queuing up for something even better. Before we move on to the next Bruce Dickinson solo album, I do also want to point out here that Bruce Dickinson participated in my favorite tribute album of all time. Back again in 1994, several big name artists put together a tribute to Black Sabbath called Nativity in Black. I don't really have a lot of tribute albums in my collection, I'll be honest. I'm not, necessarily a huge fan of these, but I think Nativity in Black is absolutely the best one of the bunch. And of all the songs on this, I think the best one of the bunch was produced by Bruce Dickinson, who comes in and does an amazing cover of Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Okay, this is one of my all-time favorite Black Sabbath songs. Love that riff. And now you get Bruce Dickinson coming in, doing the vocals on this. It is amazing. So, as I'm clearly talking about all the great songs Bruce Dickinson did as a solo artist, go back and find, if you can, Nativity in Black, and pull up Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, one of the best cover songs of all time, and really back to just showing what a talented singer Bruce Dickinson is. Going back to the Balls to Picasso album, while I just got through telling you what a tremendous album it was artistically, I don't feel like it did very well in the marketplace. And, sometimes I look at these artists and I think, what a shocker. Bruce Dickinson standing in what looks like a bus terminal with someone scribbling Balls to Picasso on the looks like bathroom tile. Oh, we're all surprised that didn't sell. Sometimes you look at these artists and you go, why would you think that is an appealing cover to an album? But I digress. So Bruce Dickinson kind of looks at this, I think, and says, this solo career is not really working, says thank you to Roy Z, and moves on about his life. And so he is about to form a new band called Skunkworks. That's right. Once again, when you talk to these artists and you're like, You're shocked that didn't sell? Skunk Works? That's as bad as Balls to Picasso. Well, anyway, the record company stepped in and said, you are not going to produce an album from a band called Skunk Works. Your name has to be on there. This has to be a Bruce Dickinson solo album. So instead of having a new band called Skunk Works, it's now the second album, or I guess the third album in the Bruce Dickinson solo career, Skunk Works. And let me just say, punchline coming in, dad joke on its way, Skunk Works was stinky. So Bruce Dickinson forms this new band, and he's going to do this new album. And he decides it's time to do a progressive grunge album. If I had $1 for every major heavy metal band in the mid-90s that decided they wanted to do a grunge album, well, I'd be halfway to $1 million. This was a big trend. I'm not going to go through all of it, but there is a lot of very talented bands that failed epically by trying to produce grunge albums. First of all, grunge was already dead by this point. You know, one of those things about, you see this in the record industry, you see it in the movie industry. A lot of times by the time people realize something, you know, they're trying to hop onto a bandwagon, that thing's been on fire for 3 years. No one's even figured it out yet. Grunge had some great moments, don't get me wrong. But here in the mid-90s, it was already starting to fade. So that was problem number one. And problem number two is, while heavy metal had been deemed, awful by the record executives and maybe by the radio stations, there was still a lot of people craving good heavy metal music that would go find these artists and then go, more grunge? I'm trying to run away from grunge. So really there was a bigger audience for good heavy metal music than anybody anticipated. So when Bruce Willis puts out a grunge album, people are like, I want metal. I don't want grunge. And thank goodness Skunk Works failed miserably. And I've seen many interviews where Bruce Dickinson just really was devastated that this didn't work, put in a lot of effort, really tried to change his style, and of course it flopped big time. But thank goodness, because from this, Bruce Dickinson is about to produce two of the greatest albums in heavy metal history. So after the flop known as Skunk Works, Roy Z comes back into Bruce Dickinson's life and says, hey, well, that Skunk Works didn't work out. Want to get back together? And at first, Bruce Dickinson was hesitant. And then Roy Z showed him some of the music and songs he was working on. And all of a sudden, Bruce Dickinson's eyes lit up like a slot machine. He could see that Roy Z was on to something special. Well, at this point, Bruce Dickinson wanted in. And not only for himself, but an old friend of his, Adrian Smith, comes into the picture as well. Adrian Smith, one of the great guitarists, underrated guitarists, of course. I think sometimes these guitarists that have spent their whole careers in like the twin dual guitarist don't nearly get enough credit. But Adrian Smith, quite frankly, one of the great guitarists in Iron Maiden. And after Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, after he departs from that, no offense to anybody else in the band, but boy, the band really did miss Adrian Smith. So him coming into this project had the whole place a little bit excited, and for good reason. This album is amazing. Accident at Birth, 1997. First and foremost, the first track on here is called Freak, and it's just heavy, and you've hit something special right off the opening track. Unbelievably good opener. Star Children, I'll say this a lot, really kind of very Maiden-esque type song. Big soaring vocals from Bruce Dickinson in this one. Again, I think this is one of those top 10 Bruce Dickinson songs. Love Star Children. Road to Hell, really a catchy, kind of fun little song. I think this is also a song that was co-written by Adrian Smith. And then it's kind of interesting. They put a ballad towards the middle of the album called Man of Sorrows. And it kind of slows the whole album down, and it kind of gives it pause. Because when it comes back, it's going to come out with the title track, Accident of Birth. Oh man, is this a big, heavy, great song. Again, one of the top 10 Bruce Dickinson songs. And then the album, just like the Balls to Picasso, you always want to leave on a high note. The last two tracks on this album are both unbelievably good. Omega is epic. Maybe the best song on this entire album. That's followed by Arc of Space, which is also epic, but it also is just a beautiful song. If you want to try this Accident of Birth out, go right to the last two tracks. You will be amazed. Two of the best songs in heavy metal history. Love those songs to death. I'm going to go on a limb here and say this, because people are going to say, well, how does it compare to the stuff he was doing in Maiden? I would say, at the very least, this album is the best thing Bruce Dickinson was involved in, going all the way back to Somewhere in Time. I love me some Somewhere in Time, but I would put this album above everything else that Maiden or Bruce Dickinson had done since then. That's how much I like this album. And believe it or not, as much as I love this album, the next one is going to be even better. I'll be honest, at this point, I've kind of lost track of where Bruce Dickinson was. Truth be told, I did not hear Accident of Birth when it came out. I had kind of thought, Bruce is off doing some weird stuff. Again, Skunk Works was kind of like the final straw for me. I'd kind of moved on with my life. But it just so happens in 1998, I just happened to pick up a metal magazine, Metal Hammer, Kerrang, one of those that was still going. And I was reading through some of the album reviews. They were doing like their top 10 albums of the year or whatever. And one of the editors says, oh, by the way, this new Bruce Dickinson album, I think it's one of the best albums of the year. And I thought, Bruce Dickinson hadn't done anything in a while that I really liked, but I'm going to go check it out because, he's always been one of my favorite artists. Went out and got The Chemical Wedding. Man, I don't remember the guy's name. I don't even remember the title of the magazine. But whoever you are out there in the metal universe, thank you, thank you, thank you. This album is an absolute classic. I can't tell you how much I like this album. The first 5 tracks of this album are so unbelievably good. It starts off with King and Crimson. It goes on to the title track, Chemical Wedding. The Tower, very good. And then it hits my 2 favorite songs on the entire album, Killing Floor, Book of Thel. And oh, by the way, Book of Thel, the best song Bruce Dickinson, on any of these albums. Book of Thel is my highlight. But I've said this before in other videos. Start with Killing Floor and let it flow into Book of Thel. You'll be glad you did. I think this piece of the album is absolutely outstanding. I think Book of Thel, one of the best heavy metal songs ever written. That's how much I like that. Now, there's a deep track a little bit later in the album, Jerusalem, very good. The Trumpets of Jericho. I could go on and on. This album is sensational. If I had one nitpick with this album, it's like the second half of the album, while still good, can't compete with the first few tracks of this album. The first half of this album is a lot stronger than the back half, but like I said, it's all good from start to finish. It's a concept album. It's a very complicated concept album, but so the whole thing flows together really well. But yeah, the second half can't compete. That first half, if you talk about the first 5 tracks of any album, I would put it up with that one. So sensational. So let's get even more controversial. I thought Accident of Birth was probably the best thing Bruce Dickinson had done since Somewhere in Time. Folks, this might be the best thing Bruce Dickinson has been involved in, going all the way back to like Power Slave or even Peace of Mind. I think this is easily in the top 5 albums Bruce Dickinson has ever produced. It is, like I said, I can't throw enough flowers at the stuff Bruce Dickinson's doing. These last 2 albums, if you, again, I'm attaching a playlist just in case you haven't heard this stuff and you're like, I don't know if I want to invest going back in this. Go to the playlist. I'm going to put like 10 songs in there, 10 of the best, but I beg of you, go put on Killing Floor, go put on Book of Thel. You'll be glad you did. Just unbelievably good stuff by Bruce Dickinson. And just like that, Bruce Dickinson's career is going great guns. And then we hear the big news. Not only is Bruce Dickinson returning to Iron Maiden, so is Adrian Smith. Iron Maiden's going to kick off a big new band with, you got it, 3 guitarists. So they did not keep 2 vocalists. Blaze Bayley, he was thrown out, but Iron Maiden would come back in. Well, speaking of Iron Maiden, what have they been up to while Bruce Dickinson's been putting out all these classics? So after Bruce Dickinson leaves the band, Iron Maiden has a very difficult task ahead of them. You have to replace one of the most iconic singers in the history of heavy metal. So they looked around and they found a guy by the name of Blaze Bayley, one of the all-time great names, by the way. He was the front man for a band by the name of Wolfsbane. So he comes into the fold and they go out and put out their 10th studio album, The X Factor. Again, the X Factor being the 10 factor, if you will, a little play on Roman numerals. This album came out in 1995. I'm not sure why Blaze Bayley didn't work, but there was just something. Blaze Bayley has a fine voice, but it just never fit into Iron Maiden. And quite frankly, I don't think Steve Harris was doing him any favors, because literally Steve Harris is putting together some of these wonderful songs, but they're just tailor-made for Bruce Dickinson's voice. And so as these songs are playing, you can't help but think, how would these sound with Bruce singing, right? And poor old Blaze, I just don't think he ever got accepted by the Iron Maiden fans. People were clamoring for Bruce, that style of singing, and poor old Blaze couldn't get it together. But as far as just grading these songs on composition alone, Maiden came out swinging with not 1, not 2, but 3 blockbuster songs. Number 1, Sign of the Cross. Number 2, Lord of the Flies. And number 3, my personal favorite, Man on the Edge. I don't know that Blaze Bayley was pulling this off, but just from a musical perspective, 3 of the best albums. You want to start an album out hot, these 3 songs are how you do it. Now, ironically enough, as you all know, the end of this story, Iron Maiden gets put back together. I made the comment that poor Blaze Bayley, these songs were really written with Bruce Dickinson's voice in mind. You can just tell it. I think we have been fortunate enough, because, of course, Iron Maiden gets back together, that we got to hear Bruce Dickinson do many of these songs from the Blaze Bayley era. And just as we had pictured them in our heads, of course, Bruce Dickinson just makes them his own right away. But, boy, Steve Harris, I have to say, while Maiden isn't going to live up to what was going on in the Bruce Dickinson solo career, man, Steve Harris could write some music, people. These 3 songs are amazing. So, great start. Then there's a song called Fortunes of War, and I bring it up because this is a sign of problems ahead. Iron Maiden's about to get into a really bad habit of having songs that are just a little too long and a little too repetitive. This is a good example, and this is going to plague them. We're going to talk about it in their next album, but even to this day, I find that Iron Maiden has kind of fallen into this trap and still is doing this to a certain extent even to this day. But I digress. The very next song is another anti-war song. Of course, again, we're back in the height of the Gulf War, but The Aftermath is a really good song. I love the first three songs. Again, Fortunes of War, not my style, but Aftermath, fourth really good song on this. Now, I've talked a lot about poor Blaze Bayley, his voice not really fitting Iron Maiden. I will say this, there's a song, a deep track, almost at the end of the album called 2 a.m., and I just think Bailey's voice is spectacular in this one song. So it seems like maybe that song was just tailor-made for him, but like I said, Blaze Bayley could sing. If you want to see, in my opinion, the best singing Blaze does in his run with Iron Maiden, go to that song, 2 a.m. And once again, we're going to close on a song called Unbeliever, 8 minutes long. Now, I'm just going to say this because I love me some Iron Maiden. And way back in the catalog, they had a song called Rime of the Ancient Mariner. That song was about a curse for killing an albatross. But I do believe Iron Maiden, this song is a little bit of a curse because it's one of my favorite Iron Maiden songs, but it kind of got Iron Maiden thinking, you know what we need to do? More long, epic songs. And while Rime of the Ancient Mariner has so many time changes and epic moments in it, a lot of these longer songs just don't need to be that long. So while Rime of the Ancient Mariner was a blessing, it was also a curse. Because once again, Iron Maiden kind of went off and started doing more and more of those type of songs, and not all of them are good. Speaking of which, let's talk about that next album, Virtual 11. Once again, a little play on words with using Roman numerals to indicate their 10th album, of course, was the X Factor. So the 11th, Virtual 11, or XI, for those of you who are just reading it. Now, I hate being critical of Iron Maiden. I don't like to deliver bad news. I would sit here and strongly support all 10 of the first Iron Maiden albums. But sadly, this is where we part company. This is a bridge too far. I really do not like this album from Iron Maiden. And it's for a lot of the reasons we were talking about in the previous album. They were already starting to show signs of this. Here it just goes full blown. Too many long songs. Too many consistent themes. One of the things that going back to the X Factor, lots of war theme songs. Now, if you're going to do a concept album about war or something like that, that's fine. But just having, 3 or 4 songs anti-war seems a little bit, again, back to being a little bit repetitive musically. The songs are a little too long. And then a lot of the tempos were also the same. We kind of get into this kind of mid-tempo, kind of soft start acoustic thing going. And so as we get to Virtual 11, we find that has become, an epidemic through this album. The Angel and the Gambler is a very good song, except it's 10 minutes long. And it doesn't quite hold up through that whole 10 minutes. The Klansman, what a great song. But it doesn't need to be 9 minutes either. Now, I will be the first to admit this is a little bit of a personal problem on my end. One of the reasons I have trouble getting into progressive metal is that I'm not a big fan of long songs where we kind of, pardon the term, fiddle and diddle around for a long bit, where it's just not doing anything different. Again, going back to Rime of the Ancient Mariner, a lot of different tempo changes, a lot of cool parts of the song. But a lot of times we're getting into a situation with these progressive songs where it's just kind of the same thing, stretched out. Like, this would be a great 6-minute song, but it's stretched out to 8. This would be a great 5-minute song. It's stretched out to 10. Really, really bad. Don't care for it. Now, it gets worse. Educated Fool and Don't Look to the Eyes of the Stranger. That is combined 15 minutes of mediocrity. Those songs are just snoozers, and they're long. It's bad enough to have a good song that you've stretched out. When you have songs that aren't all that compelling and you're stretching them out, ooh, now you've got a big problem on your hands. And finally, the very last song, Como Está, Amigo? Again, this isn't as long as those other songs. It's about 5.5 minutes long. But when you play this song at about the 3.5-minute mark, you're done. You've done everything this song is going to do. And like the last 2 minutes, it's just saying over and over, hey, hey, amigo, no more tears, amigo. Hey, guess what, amigo? No more tears. It just goes on and on. The last 2 minutes is just unnecessary. And this is the trap, like I said, that Iron Maiden has fallen into. And it's unfortunate. Because on one hand, you've got Bruce Dickinson just absolutely crushing it. And me, big Iron Maiden fan, thinking this was going to be an awesome era, new Iron Maiden singer. We're going to do great. By the time Virtual 11 comes out, I've kind of started getting pretty bored with this new Iron Maiden direction. Like I said, this is the end of the Wilderness era. Bruce Dickinson, Adrian Smith are going to come back in the fold. They're going to put out a big new album in the year 2000, Brave New World. So we'll check in on them again after the big reunion. But if we're going to recap the whole Iron Maiden Wilderness era, I think it starts first and foremost with The Chemical Wedding, Accident of Birth, a close second. I think Balls to Picasso has to be number 3. And you got to go quite a ways. X Factor, pretty good album. Skunk Works, Virtual 11, hard pass. And that's our episode. It's just always interesting when a band breaks up. Sometimes you get both sides of the fence putting out great stuff. Sometimes it's odd. Like one side of the fence does really great, the other side struggles. In this case, once again, Bruce Dickinson knocked out of the park. I think Iron Maiden was ready for Bruce Dickinson to come back by the end of this. Again, no shade on poor old Blaze Bayley. He was in a rough spot from the get-go. Now, we are doing videos every week. Every Tuesday we get together. We have been doing a series on the Grammys where we go year by year through the greatest heavy metal albums of all time. We just got through with the 90s. We talked a little bit about Bruce Dickinson through that stretch. But when we get back, we're going to be talking about the 2000s. And we're going to be talking about reunited Iron Maiden, among other things. So if you like this content, subscribe, ring the bell, feed the YouTube algorithm. And we'll see you back here next Tuesday. In the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. Take care.